Hi there. Welcome to Lefty Knits. My name's Molly, and this is actually podcast episode number 11. Thanks so much for joining me today. Here on the Lefty Knits channel, we talk all things knitting. So if that's the kind of thing you're into, please consider going down below and pressing that subscribe button. I release new videos every week, and if you're subscribed, you'll know right away as soon as I release a new video. Today I have a typical podcast episode for you. I don't have that much new stuff to share, so it'll probably be a pretty quick one. I have one new whip and one acquisition, so there's a little bit of stuff that hopefully will be interesting. I'll start out with what I'm wearing. So this is the Lakes Pullover by Ozetta. I used a discontinued Knit Picks yarn, Upcycle Reserve 100% wool worsted in the color Amarillo. I bought a ton of this yarn when it was available because I think it was under like $3 maybe per one, or I guess they're 50 gram balls. I have a whole other sweater in this, a cardigan, the Trago, which I believe I've talked about before on this channel, so I'll link that. But yeah, this is the Lakes Pullover, a pretty popular pattern, I would say, along with a lot of Ozetta's other patterns. I did mention this in my spring knitting plans video, and this is one of the things that I actually did knit during the spring. I talked about it before my hiatus. I cast it on in April and I finished sometime in May. The details are a little fuzzy because that was PhD finishing time, but I know I finished this before I finished my PhD, so sometime before mid-May. I really enjoyed knitting this. It was my first true saddle shoulder construction. I did knit the Vellin by Camille Descoteaux, which had a little bit of a saddle shoulder detail, but it was mostly raglan based, I guess. For those of you who aren't super familiar with saddle shoulder constructions, you essentially create these two rectangles of yarn and you knit these first on either side of the shoulder. So these become the top of the shoulder, and then you pick up along the edges and you cast on along the front and the back to create like a sweater shape, basically. I really love this sweater, and since it's kind of become fall, I've been wearing a little bit more. It had a hiatus over the summer, but here in the Bay Area where I live, we do tend to have like a variety of temperatures throughout the day. So this has been great to throw on during some of the chillier nights that we have. I've been really enjoying wearing it. It's a very easy fit. Like, it's pretty oversized, but it's not like fully engulfing me, and I knit it pretty cropped. I will insert some footage of me standing up and walking around and wearing it. The one thing I don't like is that it's been pilling like crazy. Pilling doesn't usually bother me too much, but I think that this is pretty bad, and I think I have de-pilled it in anticipation of talking about it, and as I've been wearing it at least 3 times in 2 weeks or less, and it just keeps coming, and I don't know if I'm making it worse by trying to de-pill it. I'm trying not to go too hard at it in any given time, but clearly it's just the pills are coming back. My guess why it's pilling, I kind of have 2 hypotheses that might go sort of hand in hand. The yarn wasn't super tightly twisted, and each strand was kind of a little bit fluffy, I guess. So that might be part of it. It's also made, I believe the upcycle part of the name is that it's made out of mill ends or some sort of byproduct of the normal spinning process. So it's possible that, unlike if you're spinning yarn from like a bat or a big piece of wool that came off of a sheep and was combed and carded and stuff, it just might not be quite as sturdy. But I'm not an expert, so it could be neither of those things. It could just be the wool, it could be almost anything. I don't think it's the way that I have been treating it, because it's not like I've been doing anything super crazy. And this was starting before I was de-pilling it a lot. So maybe I haven't made it better, but I don't think I've made it much worse. Anyway, it's not that big of a deal. I'll keep wearing it, especially as a more casual around the house piece. I think if it wasn't pilling so much, it might be more appropriate for like an office or something, a casual-ish office, but I'm not sure that I would do that, but it's fine. This is just what happens sometimes with knitting. So now that we've talked about what I'm wearing, let's go ahead and talk about my finished-ish object. So my only finished object is not actually blocked because I was blocking something else. I also haven't woven in the ends because someone once told me, and I think it might be true, that it's kind of better to sew in the ends after you block it. And, you know, it's definitely a matter of personal preference, but I think I found that it's easier if you have to go back and fix things after you block it. Like if certain things need to be frogged down or you have to add more, it's easier to pick out your bind off that way. It's also easier to make sure that your ends aren't going to stick out when you sew them in, but I mean, it doesn't matter that much, but there are ends. I promise I'll show this as an actual finished object probably next week. Anyway, I haven't said what this is yet. This is the Quilty by Tiff Nealon. I used Fleurville 4-ply from the Yarn Collective and Knit Picks Bear Stroll for this. I've talked about this a few times on here now. I made the full length version. I wasn't anticipating having enough yarn to make the full length version. I thought I would have to go cropped and I might be playing a little bit of yarn chicken, because for my size, the third size I believe, it's supposed to take like 900 yards of the main color, and I used a little under 700. I don't know if it's the yarn, I don't know if it's my tension, you know, lots of things could be happening. It might also just be a very generous estimate to make sure that you have enough yarn, and I did make it a tiny bit shorter than the full length version just because I am not a very tall person. So I think it's probably a 1/2 inch shorter, which was probably a little less of the yarn then. Like I think I took a couple, maybe 2 rows off the ribbing and was, I don't know, 1/4 of an inch short on the body, which may block out a little bit as well. This does, in the pattern, have an option for a contrast picot hem, which I did not do. I did a sewn tubular bind off, and I kind of meant to do the picot bind off, but I just forgot. I did a tubular bind off on the sleeves. I think that it just recommends you bind off in pattern, but I like the look generally of a tubular bind off, and I don't mind doing it as much as I once did. I only mind if I have to unpick it. So I think I was just in that mindset of like, I'm doing tubular bind offs, I gotta do one on this. And so I just did it on the hem too. And I mean, I'm not that bothered by it. I think it's fine. I think it looks nice as is. If I cared a lot, I could obviously add the hem. I don't care that much. I think picking out tubular bind off is like not worth it to me to have that detail, so I will keep it as is. And I did try it on. It's a little bit tight. I think it will block out pretty nicely. So I'm excited to be able to wear this soon. I will be putting it on the blocking mats tonight because they're open now, and I'll have an update for y'all soon. So moving on to my whips. We'll start with one you've seen before. This is my Sunday morning wrap by Lisa DeFruscia for Espace Tricot. It was written to originally use a discontinued Espace Tricot yarn. I am using a yarn, 100% alpaca yarn from an alpaca farm outside of Huntsville, Alabama. I believe it's somewhere in northern Alabama that I got locally because my boyfriend is from Huntsville. So when I showed this last time, I think I had knit maybe 2 repeats. The hem is curling, I think, because of my cast on, but I think that'll block out okay. It's just making it a little hard to show, but basically this pattern is repeats of this rib pattern followed by stockinette, followed by a rib, followed by stockinette, and you do that 5 times. It's a free pattern, so it's not like I'm revealing anything you couldn't find very easily yourself. And when let's see, I have a marker in here to show where I was up to last time. Okay, here we go. So I was here last episode. Now I'm here. So I've made a good bit of progress. I'm a little over halfway through the 4th repeat of this pattern, and so all I have left is the 5th and the edging, which is just this ribbing pattern repeated a few times. And I just broke into my 3rd ball of this. I have 4 total, so I think I should be fine, even though you are increasing 2 stitches on each edge every right side row. I think I'll still have plenty of yarn for that. It's not increasing it. Well, it's increasing at a pretty fast rate. I would say, I think you cast on over 200 stitches to start, so, and you end with almost 400, so it does get pretty big. I would say that when I started this, it was a nice portable project that I didn't have to think that hard about, because it's just ribbing with these large sections of stockinette, and that I obviously don't have to look up. The ribbing, there's some like stuff on the sides that changes a little bit depending on which row of the ribbing you're in, so I would kind of briefly have to check the pattern for that, but it was very easy to do. But it's much less portable now, just because it's so long, it's very big, and each row takes a long time. Like, I think I forget that sometimes about these big shawl patterns. I don't mind purling that much, but straight purling for 300 stitches isn't exactly my favorite. So I think I'll be happy to have this finished. It's still relatively meditative, relatively easy when I just have a minute and I don't want to think that hard, especially compared to the next whip I'm going to show you. But it's not... It's something that I think I'm ready to have off the needles and to have in my wardrobe for when the weather changes. I think it'll be great to bring to Alabama for probably Christmas will be when we go, because my boyfriend's mother did kindly gift me the money to buy this yarn for Christmas. So it'll be warmer for a slightly colder climate than here, and it will be nice to just be able to show off what I've made. I'm hoping that maybe I can just crank this out over the next couple days, but that might be a little optimistic, so I will keep you posted on this one. My next whip is much less fun than I thought it was going to be yesterday. So this is the Lodestar by Kirsten Rovetta. I just have a very sad start of the neckline. This is from Pom Pom issue 37, so that was summer 2021. I got it at Farmer's Daughter Fibers in Great Falls, Montana when I was there with my boyfriend's family, and it was a really fun store. I have been really taken by the Lodestar since I first saw it around the time the pattern came out. This is what it looks like. I'm finding it to be a little difficult. I'm not super experienced with lace knitting. It's not something that I've done too much. Like, I think I'm generally pretty comfortable with it, but the fact that you're making these these like star patterns. This star has been a little difficult to like emulate. So essentially there's these rows of eyelets between rows of decreasing stitches that are centered around this decrease that is a centered decrease in the middle, and they go in towards this. And I had gotten probably to like around here, and I realized I didn't have the same number of eyelets and like middle decrease stitches for one part because I was beginning to run out of stitches to do that star pattern, as they call it. There's a couple things about this that are pretty different than a lot of patterns I've done before. So this is my beginning of round marker, and instead of being the center back, or, well, I guess usually a lot of times patterns I work on, the marker will be at the center back either for the whole thing, or it will be center back and then it'll move to under the arm when you separate the sleeves and the body. Here, this beginning of round marker is on one of the shoulders. It's on the left shoulder, I believe. For me, it's on the right shoulder because I am a mirror knitter, a left-handed knitter, so it's going to be on the other shoulder for me. But basically, you do some short row shaping for the back of the neck that isn't obviously centered around your center marker. It kind of is a little hard to visualize for me at first. And the other thing is that as you're making these centered decreases, you're moving your stitch markers like every row that you're making this V-shaped lace pattern. And I think that that can cause some room for error that probably is what got me into the pickle last time. But because I wasn't super confident, I was a little bit confused. I did kind of feel like I was just getting the hang of it when I realized that I had messed up. So instead of trying to fix my problem, I just said, screw it. And I ripped it all out and I cast it on again. I'll show you some pictures of where I was, but this is kind of sad for me, but this is how knitting is. Sometimes you gotta frog things. I definitely wouldn't have been able to fix it. I'm worried I would have dropped some of the yarn overs if I tried to frog back all the way, and it would just get really complicated. So I think this was the right move, and it's just sometimes how being a knitter goes. Sometimes you gotta rip back a mostly completed yoke because you just couldn't do it right the first time. I don't think I talked about the yarn that I used here. I've talked about this pattern many times. This has been a plan of mine for like, I think more or less the entirety of me filming YouTube videos. I am using Valley Yarn's Northfield, which is a merino, silk, and alpaca blend. And my colorway is Sea Spray, and I'll link it below. So I have one acquisition. This is Lefty Knits yarn. It is the colorway Oil Slick. And it's on a 2-ply fingering weight yarn. It's 80% superwash merino and 20% nylon, 400 yards for 100 grams. Now, I kind of mentioned this in my I'm back video, my breaking of my hiatus video, in passing, because I was worried this yarn was gonna sell out. So I didn't really mention exactly what yarn I was planning to buy, but this is it. So I know Casey, she's a knitwear designer. She has a lot of different shawl and cowl patterns, some of which I have made before. And she used to live here in the Bay Area and work at Black Squirrel Berkeley, which is where I bought this yarn from, and I believe where she would do the dyeing for this yarn. She has a few yarns that she had been dyeing here in Berkeley, but she recently moved away, unfortunately, so she's not dyeing currently. Whew. just sneezed. I don't plan to use this very soon, but I really wanted to make sure that I got my hands on it. I bought this to go with the dirty, oh no, the skein is coming undone. I got this to go with the Dirty Water Dye Works yarn that I bought at Gather here in Cambridge, Massachusetts. So this is a local Boston dyer. This yarn is the Lillian base, and it's 100% superwash merino, and it is 400 yards for 100 grams. Online, this looked like it had maybe a little bit more green. I don't know how well it's picking up, but there's like some sort of greeny hues in this that I was hoping would pair well with this yarn. And I still, even though this isn't quite as dark as I was expecting, I think that these yarns will still pair really well together. I went with the 2-ply. In this, there was a 4-ply as well, plus DK and a yak base as well. I went with the 2-ply because this is also a 2-ply yarn. They have the same yardage, so I think that they will knit up really well together. And my plan for these is to make the elf mail. I believe the designer for that is Danny Negus, and I should be able to, with one skein of a contrast and main color, make a short sleeve version of that. I'm happy that I was able to get my hands on some of her OG yarn from when she was here in Berkeley, and I am okay with waiting to work it up, but I am definitely excited for it. That's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed hanging out with me while I explained the state of my knitting. It's going pretty well, I would say. Please tell me below what you've been working on yourself. I'd love to hear about it. Always down to chat knitting with people so that I don't bother my boyfriend and everyone else who's in my life with too much of this stuff. If you liked this video, please go ahead and give it a like down below and consider subscribing. I release videos about knitting every Friday. I hope you'll join me next week and have a great rest of your day. Bye.